Well,
figuring out the new landscape so that we can continue our support and everything as we continue on in this different environment now.
great. Thanks. So the goal of this is to share what we've learned and to create a community as we're all trying to figure this out as fast as possible, and to learn from each other's mistakes, and to learn from anything we've found in the industry and what people are doing and how they're getting it done. And we figured just get it out there and learn what we don't know as fast as possible. And that's 100% the goal. So keeping it open. So the rest of the schedule is going to be every next 3 Thursdays at 4. We're going to come on each Thursday with another topic, continuing down this path. We felt like that as more and more people end up working from home, and as they've been working from home for a longer and longer amount of time, we're going to continue to have new issues and new ideas. So we thought that we would be easy to continue this, and we're looking forward to getting feedback from you guys on what you want to know and giving me some research to go do. And I'm constantly looking at different tools and tricks to make this better, because we're only beginning to see, I think, the impact it's gonna have on all of our businesses. So we said it earlier, but any specific questions you have or anything you want me to talk about or Sarah to talk about, you can post that in the chat or question and answer section, and we're going to try to keep an eye on that, and we'll talk about as many as we can. And once we get through all information, if you want to disconnect, you're welcome to. We'll have this recorded, and we'll send the slide deck out. And anybody wants a phone call to go in depth, please. Like, we're all trying to figure this out as fast as we can. And like I said, the more people we get involved, the better. So great. So we're remote work first, episode 1. So what we seem to see people doing most is overlooking the complexity of taking this in person's entire job role and displacing it outside the office. You take advantage of the things you have at the office, of the internet, of the computer, even the desk, and all those things. So we wanted to talk about that and all the things we're seeing come up around that environment. So that's what this first day is going to be. And then we'll use this to lead into our next one next week. So what we find is best is to sit down and make a simple list of what each job or team member needs to do their job. It seems kind of rudimentary, but we're finding a lot of missing things in the processes that they don't realize. Does the person need dual monitors to do their job? Do they have a desktop scanner? Do they need a phone? Do they need a keyboard, mouse? Sometimes all the computer people have at their home might be the iPad issued to them by the school. So sitting through and going through each person's process and saying, okay, they need access to this software. They're going to need dual monitors because they have to receive checks on this monitor and deposit on this monitor, and analyzing that with each person before you start to say, okay, you're going to go work from home, because it's not as simple as we want it to be, where we just get to unplug our computer, drive home, and plug it in. That creates a lot of issues, and we're going to go through some of that and try to learn that process together. But so getting that list is definitely your first stop, and it will lead into the questions we need to ask further down the road, knowing whether or not they even have a place to have their computer. How big of a computer do they have? Like right now, we can't get computers. If I try to order laptops, desktops, they're super hard to find. Dell's back ordered, HP's back ordered, Amazon's behind. So we're trying to make use of what everybody has. So knowing where they need to be is definitely where you can start before you just start buying equipment and software. So.
Yeah, and I think it's important to add here that we're going to be reviewing some of these things later on in SecureWise. Just now knowing that list of what softwares they need and whatever, and if it's client-based, meaning on desktop or PC, or web-based, what the best choice we're making to keep your environment secure. If you don't know us, our big passion is security today and growth for tomorrow. And if you don't have security today, then you won't have growth tomorrow. And so this is not only about getting your people working from home, but getting them working from home securely.
Great. So in this, one of the next steps you do with your actual employees is to survey. And it sounds super simple. We've got some templates I'm happy to share, but simple questions to have them check their internet speed, to confirm that it can support remote sharing. Out in the rural areas, a lot of people have a satellite vendor. And those just don't work. They work fine for like checking email, but when you're trying to stream data, it falls apart. And before you go down that path, knowing what they have to work with internet is definitely a very first step. There is options with like 4G and hotspots, but you need to have the tools in place to monitor and control that bandwidth and make sure they don't put their kids' games on the hotspot, et cetera. So just wrapping your head around that and making sure you've thought of that before you go shipping people home is a big step. Knowing whether or not they have only wireless at their house or they have the ability to plug in. Some people live in apartment complexes, they're given free Wi-Fi. So if you ask them, hey, I have free internet, I have internet at home, I'm good to go, but you send them home with a desktop computer and a voice over IP phone, they're not going to have anywhere to plug that in. So having to have that conversation so that you can adapt the package that you give them to work at home with is very important. And anybody who's worked from home realizes this next question pretty quickly: having a quiet place, having a place you can set up your office, set your computer up, and having the power to plug your stuff in, having the power to ability to plug in the internet. Is the room lit well enough? Do they have enough desk space? I feel like I take advantage of sometimes you have employees that are in a shared workspace, shared home space, excuse me, to where they may have roommates in their home, and you need to know that before you're going ahead and sending them home with your intellectual property and computers. If they're in a shared work home, you may not be able to do that because of compliance and risk. So having these questions of things that affect you answered in advance will help you build the package you send them home with. So you need to one key thing to keep in mind around that, shared home places where we kind of came this idea is your office security. You've invested a tremendous amount of money in that security, in the controlling the data, backing the data up, right? And as soon as we now invite in everyone's home into their office, is what's effectively what we're doing now. Our security is only as strong as our weakest point, and the bad guys know this. They're already attacking these home users. They're already trying to use this because it's as simple as getting into the home. And now, in some cases, if it's done incorrectly, they can transcend into your office. And that's the thing that none of us want to happen. We've got to, talk about that isolation, to isolate the home computer from the work, because at work you have a very complex security appliance and antivirus and backups. But at the home, the computer's, I don't know, 10 years old. They haven't rebooted in 5 months. The antivirus expired when the trial ran out from they bought the computer from Best Buy. Whatever those variables are, we need to make sure we're thinking about it and we're providing our solution to make sure that it is covering the asset, which is our business. So there's a couple big options, and we wanted to get in the nitty gritty details of this to help you think about the option that you are pushing out. Oh, somebody texted me. I don't know if you can't hear me or something. Hold on. Oh, anyway. So option one, this is the most common thing you see. It's very easy to do, and that is using a remote access tool. This could be log me in. This could be remote rescue. This could be, there's just dozens of them. Just tools that let you take computer A and easily remote into computer B. So there is some pros to that. There is some level of isolation, and it's super fast to deploy. It's really great in small environments that have, a fairly educated work staff. They have their own computer, they have decent internet, and there's only a few of them. There is quite a bit of cost to it. It can add up quite quickly if you had to do this for, say, a larger organization. But typically, you can deploy this pretty quickly. There's some decent administration tools on it to where, as an administrator, you can buy so many licenses and share them with your staff. You can tell when they've logged in, and often you can see what they're doing and see their screen. It's a pretty good solution. It's pretty easy. The con is you're going to require a home computer or an iPad, or sometimes it'll work on a Chromebook. And the computer's health of that can affect you greatly. If that computer is really old, if it barely is running, obviously it's going to affect their ability to go to work, and do their job from the house. One of the recommendations I come from this is a two-factor authentication. If you're not using two-factor authentication on your remote access now, or it's kind of like when you log into your credit card and they text you a code, it's the same principle here. You may say, well, it's in their home, it's secure, but is it? What if their child's there, or you know, or the bad guys happen to be on their home computer? That two-factor, that second level authentication, will give you that safety that their password hasn't been compromised. The person has another authentication method. So go ahead. It's great for the companies that low security and low regulatory compliance because of that ease of deployment. It's high security risk to us because you are using their computer with pretty minimal isolation, and there's a potential for like key loggers and things like that to get in the middle and capture that information between you. Uh, it's definitely not the worst solution, but there's some stuff to take in mind when you're deploying.
Yeah, so just from a process standpoint, what this looks like is that they have their computers at the office that are online, and their computer from home is going to be logging into that. So the other thing that I would state that the possible breakdowns are that they don't leave the computer online, the internet goes down at the office, or the internet goes down at home. There's kind of this dual area of possible failure. But when you get it up and running, it's very easy to deploy. It doesn't need an IT person to get it up and started. It's generally typically pretty easy to comprehend.
It's also good to know that one thing that we didn't note in these options, this option is also fairly internet friendly, bandwidth friendly. So if the person at home has kind of less than awesome internet, these tools that you're buying, these remote access tools like LogMeIn, are designed around that, and they're pretty good at compensating for bad internet or 4G or hotspots or Wi-Fi, and they can kind of they give you some forgiveness with that type of solution. So yeah. Yeah, this one. So I can't tell you how many times I got calls that, hey, we send all of our employees home with their computers, help them get going. Woo wee. So the computer at your
Whit,
office, and yes, ma'am.
before we go on, we got a question from Lisa. She's
Mm,
asking, is the risk the same when they're using firm assets to remote in versus personal equipment?
yeah. So the risk is well, let's say, yes and no. Okay. So when we're saying firm assets, they're taking their computer home, what we're talking about right here. So that is better for the sake of that you have control of that computer. But the problem with that is now the company owned data, you have to imagine now it's left the building and it's potentially on that computer in that person's home. If you're in a low compliance organization or you don't have a lot of proprietary information, that's probably fine. You Depending on your client applications and what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, this method can be the heaviest internet usage because literally the data is having to leave the office, come home, they're having to work on it at home and go back and forth. So you're basically like everything you're doing, you're moving it back and forth between. Now, a lot of people are online only, right? They're all web-based, and that's great, that's fine. But for example, particularly like HIPAA, as soon as that work computer has left the building and now it's at home, it's considered a remote computer. And by best practices, now we need to encrypt that computer because if the employee A and they had the computer at home, they left for the weekend and came back, the computer's gone, you'd have to attest that, hey, there is no PHI or credit card numbers on that computer. It's not possible. Or you'd have to encrypt it. And it adds a whole nother complication by taking the computer home. So there's like new risks, I guess is be the way to say it. Now, to fix that, if you have a workload that's extremely well suited, you can buy a hardware-based VPN appliance to provide that isolation. And what that would do is let you take your company's work computer, take it home. It would then go into the hardware-based appliance, and that would tunnel all the traffic back to the office. That isolates that computer from the house. It provides a second layer authentication back to the office. It's still heavy bandwidth intensive, but there is certain cases where that is better. And with setting up encryption and good screen lock policies on the home computer, you can make this method work. But it's unfortunately not as easy as just unplugging it and driving home. I hope that answers the question thoroughly. Please feel free to ask more. And
In
Jim,
addition, yep, you
go
would like
ahead.
to know if video conferencing will work with the option one.
Yeah, so video conferencing will work with any of these, really. It depends on whatever video conferencing solution you're going to use. Like for my company, we use Teams. It's included with Office 365. We use it at the office 24/7. Now, the one thing that doesn't work well is streaming video over any of these solutions because the programs like Team and Zoom are meant to encode and decrypt that data. And so if you're running Zoom on your work computer and then you're trying to watch the video from your home computer, that connection is not meant to encode and encrypt data video. Zoom is. So it's always better, unfortunately, to run video heavy intensive applications on the employee on the remote end so that happens over there. Your experience will just be way better. So any of those applications, I've never seen one that works well.
So
Now,
if I'm understanding you correctly, you can still use video conferencing, but you just wouldn't use LogMeIn or any of those the remote tools to do that. You would do that on the computer itself.
yeah, you'd actually the person would open up Log Me In on the computer at their home, and I'm not sorry, Log Me In, the Zoom or Team, and they would run it there. So the video is happening on their actual computer, not at the office, and being streamed over that connection. That being said, there is a tool called VDI. It's it's more typically expensive, but it is transcending down into the SMB mid-market space. But it gives you a virtual computer in the cloud. It is meant more for that. It'll handle video. It'll handle things like YouTube well. It's just cost prohibitive. It's typically around $100 a user per month. But it is like the cat's meow when it comes to this stuff. It's not a thing I'm talking about because it is a very expensive solution, and it's typically reserved for the enterprise, and that because of that price point. So continuing on in option two. Option two is taking their work computer home. Basically, unplug that box, drive it home, plug it in. Pro, obviously, they have everything like they had it at work, right? All their programs are loaded. They have antivirus on it. They're used to using it. It's got their stuff. But then the con is your environment may not need modifications. For example, most of your work computers are joined to a domain. Once you take the computer home, they won't have access to the domain unless you do the hardware-based VPN. So sometimes you have to make some changes so that computer will continue to work okay at home, or so it'll be able to log in, stuff like that. You can often do software-based VPNs, but I'll tell you one thing, software VPNs make the most tickets in our organization, the whole wide world, because people just don't seem to understand them. It is a kind of a complicated process where they're basically temporarily, I should explain this. I didn't, I'm sorry. So we have a hardware-based VPN. We talked about that earlier, where there's a box at your house, and that basically tunnels your house to the office through the internet. You can't imagine as a tunnel. It's a secure tunnel of data, whereas a software VPN goes on the PC, and it's done on the software level. But the problem that confuses people is they have to initiate the VPN, turn it on, turn it off, or they're not connected. So it's another thing they have to log into, et cetera, et cetera. So another little bit complication. So it's not quite as easy as a hardware-based one, but it does exist. It does help. And another con to remember is you need the security protocols tying to home. You got to think that this computer is sitting in the kitchen table, and the kid might be there. And if it's logged into the, online, a kid might start surfing the web. And what does that mean? So making sure maybe you reduce the screen time out, and give some amplified training on locking your computer when you walk away from it, because you're exposing your office. You're particularly exposed by taking your work computer home. Go ahead. Yeah, so it's good for people that work solely on web-based applications. So, i.e., your entire organization works off of www. I mean, I'm definitely abbreviating that concept and that idea, but your your entire company is all web-based. So you don't have anything that's an actual client you run on your computer. So they can just fire it up, run it. It works great for that. And the reason is because those tools often, most likely, secure themselves to the internet. So you don't need to necessarily leverage your office network as much to do that. It's incredibly easy to do. It's pretty internet. Since it's not as internet sensitive as like a VPN or something, but obviously you need good internet. All that data is going up there. Like we said earlier, you got to remember this means the data is leaving the office, because the computer's left the office. The employee has data at the home. For some organizations, it doesn't matter, but for some it does. We need to make sure we take care of that or make modifications to the equipment to protect us.
Yeah, something I heard you talking about earlier to a customer was the ability to print from home, and how this type of policies or procedures would have to be put in place during this time period, about their abilities, should they be able to print from home. And that's really company by company basis.
Yeah, it's definitely in that first section when you're determining what do they need to be able to do their job. Well, if they need to print out your entire, shipping report for the month, and you happen to, it has all your customers' names and address and stuff, what kind of risk does that expose your organization to for that paper to be outside the organization? So knowing that in advance, and then also most of these tools, basically all of them, have the ability to block printing. Or block the clipboard, to block file sharing. So we want to make sure that when we're doing the setup, we're thoroughly looking for those settings to make sure if we need to, we're blocking printing, we're blocking file sharing, we're blocking clipboard, so they can't bring that data. onto their home PC or print it out or whatever. It's kind of up to you, up to what your rules are and what your workload is, but you need to definitely think about that.
And with that, I mean, that I'm guessing for HIPAA and regulatory compliance, any PCI that would be required for this type of environment.
Yeah, I mean, you, I don't know how you could get by the rules without denying those abilities. I mean, it's all kind of gray, but you have to control the data. You have to control the patient's information and guarantee it's not leaking outside the organization. So yes, right. I mean, I wouldn't do it. I would never recommend a customer do it. I'd say no. Do not let them take that patient data home. If they need to be able to see something, get them a second monitor so they don't have to print it. They can pull it up on the monitor, do the work without having that piece of paper on the desk. And they should do that at the office too, because printing. But yeah,
Good recommendation.
yeah. I mean, even 3 monitors. You can get a lot of monitors. It's just managing that workload to not have that asset, that digital information leave the office is important. Remote desktop. This is typically the one we mostly use. Most of our customers, as part of their disaster recovery plan or even their normal day-to-day working, they have a program called Remote Desktop. It's part of Microsoft Windows, super easy. It's a neighbor to the program of VDI that I was talking about earlier. It's definitely a cheaper, simpler version of it, but it still does not like streaming video. Video is incredibly hard for it to do, or audio even. It'll do audio, it doesn't like it though. But what it basically is in your infrastructure, in your servers, or a lot of our customers are in the data center. We have dedicated servers that are set up to host users. And what happens is the user will connect in through a secure tunnel that's set up via a web page with the right way, and they are presented a virtual desktop that's running in the cloud or at your office. And the glory of this is, one, it requires very little bandwidth. It's like 100K a second, which I know it doesn't mean much to you, but I'll tell you, like Netflix is like 2,000 to 3,000K a second. So we're down at 100K a second. So it's very light. It's very fast to deploy for large organizations, because once you set up these server farms or these cluster servers, and sometimes it's just one server, the assets are there. The user goes to a web page, enters a login they're used to. Two-factor is incredibly easy to turn on. They get presented with a desktop, they do their work, and the data doesn't leave the office. The data is happening at the server. It's happening right next to all your normal stuff. It's fast because of that. It's reliable because of that. You can back it up, and you have a lot of control of everything too. But because all that's happening on the far end, it's kind of similar to the log me in or the remote application like we talked about in option 1, but faster to scale, a little bit more configuration options, more control than some of those applications. It's definitely cheaper for larger organizations because I can do it once and then share it to all instead of having to install that application on everybody's PC. And it's also typically, I'd say, less requirement on their hardware when you do this. You can go buy a Chromebook. A lot of our customers will use what we call thin terminals, which is basically a really dumbed down computer. All it can do is connect to the farm. It would be even possible to we have these things called iGel. It's a little USB stick. You could take it, you could give it to your employee, take it home, plug it into their computer, and as soon as you reboot that computer, it would now only connect to the office. And then when they're done, they just pull the USB stick out and reboot, and their computer would go back to the way it was. So you could kind of take a person's personal computer, secure it temporarily with this method, and then when this is all said and done, they can go back to business as usual, right? So that's a really big strength to this. The licensing for it is pretty reasonable. It's not a monthly fee. You can buy it. There's also options to do rental with Microsoft, especially in the data center stuff. You'll see a lot of that stuff. But let's go on to our pros and cons. I think, yeah, I went through all that. Never mind. So it's great for high security, high regulatory compliance. The data never leaves the office. There's no third parties. It's all your own software. You host it. It's all internal. So, HIPAA compliance, PCI compliance, all of those checkboxes, it's super easy to cover. It is more complicated to set up. It has a lot of the back end work, but that makes the front end a lot easier because you're literally giving all your employees a website and saying, go log in. And they should be presented with something familiar, and they should be able to get back to work. Like we said, it's very high secure. The data stays at the office.
So we're reaching kind of a point where we're going to be just kind of transitioning to summing up. And I really, at this point, these are what we see as the best 3 options for you guys to be able to get employees home and working from their remote environments. I know some of you guys are part of the essentials right now, and we hope that list stays as is, but in the fact that they might have to lock us down even further, we want to get people as prepared as possible to get as many people working from home. So out of those 3, are there questions that you want to have explained further, or just any comments about them at this point?
Yeah. So yeah, I can answer, while waiting for people to type. From our poll, it looks like connectivity is one of the biggest concerns. And that's a lot of what we're talking about here, is the different ways to come in. So, next week I can even present some examples if you guys like. I could show you the differences between the way it's presented. If anybody wants to talk about it sooner, call me up. I can show you the difference between these solutions. We can do some deep diving. I'm just trying to show as many people as we can how this looks and how it works. So beyond that, it looks like there's a 4-way tie with cost, culture management, proprietary data loss, and productivity monitoring. And 2 of those I can kind of group up. So we're probably going to talk about proprietary data loss and productivity monitoring next time, because I've got some pretty cool tools we've used for years that can really help out with that stuff. So
I do see a question that came through about any options for signing IRS forms without using a printer.
Yeah, so you would use Adobe Pro. Should be able to do that because it's just a PDF, if I'm not wrong, and you can do a signature capture to capture your actual signature and use that. If you're trying to use it for customers, or for actual people you're trying to send them forms, ask them to sign, I'm pretty sure that DocuSign would let you load that form in a DocuSign, and then you could email it to the customer. After, you can even go in there and highlight the fields you need them to fill, and they can literally on their cell phone sign it. So it's I would consider it their signature, and I believe it's compliant. Would pretty quick check if we wanted to check with that. I bet like DocuSign has documentation talking about the IRS compliance for that. So
it sounds like you're willing to follow up with her later, though, with a sure. Yes, that will work.
Yeah.
Or not? Okay. Okay. So side notes on this, some things that we've heard from people that are finding issues is just that to remind your employees that if they are dialing from a soft phone at home, that if they dial 911, that the police will be going to the office, not to their house. So to be not using that for those purposes from their house. That cloud vendors have increased their load or their demand on them. And so signing up for their newsletter or email to get alerted for outages or reduced performance would at least get you a little bit in front of possible issues.
Yeah, like a quick example, like Office 365 has a free app you can put on your phone. I think it's called Office 365 Admin. You put in your normal credentials there, and then they will pop up and alert you when your instances are having performance issues or something. It might just give you a heads up. I mean, I know Zoom, for example, the same service we're using, the free edition, they removed the ability to use the phone, and I believe they downgraded the quality. Same thing with Teams. Teams took their quality down to 720 frames for resolution instead of, it used to be HD. So they're all trying to make compromises to keep this alive. And it's just kind of, if you use these tools on a day-to-day basis, getting on those little newsletters from them will kind of keep you from being surprised when all of a sudden things are different.
Also, just many carriers are offering rush services for critical services like internet. So don't be afraid to ask what resources people have right now to get you guys connected in whatever environments that you need. And a big one to note for your employees as they're headed home, to remind them that kids and dogs, etc., these things are going to happen, and people are a lot more forgiving of it than they might have been a month ago, but that they need to keep their professionalism. Regardless of what happens, they need to be professional with dog, cat, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, we all need to know it happens. It's not the end of the world. Take a deep breath, and it's okay. We're all working from home. So.
Any other questions from chat? I did have one that I was thinking about for medical offices. I've heard a lot of medical offices trying to send home billers. Is there anything that you can give them as tips or advice for the best possible way that that would be done?
Yeah, billers are a prime example. They typically all need dual screens, and often I'll find that they all want to be in their application more than once. So by what that means is like they're going to want to log in once, and then if they can log in again because they're trying to compare the charts to the bill to make sure that everything matches up. The best way we've seen to do that is with the third option, and we can actually set up the ability for them to log in twice so that they can go home, they can log in to the remote desktop server farm 2 times, and then they can launch their application twice so that they can, it's resource intensive. Yes, we're having to do 2 of everything, but billers are billers, they got a bill. So we, give them that ability to have double. And that's the big thing I see, having all their documentation digital. So hopefully you're receiving faxes digitally. And a lot of people don't know that if they're receiving faxes on a copier, most modern copiers, you can tell it to start saving that as a PDF in a folder. So even though your faxes are coming out the office, they can save to a folder, and anyone anywhere can log in and get those faxes. It's super easy one, and most of them do it for free. Or you do have to be careful with online faxing services. Not all of them are HIPAA compliant. A lot of times they charge extra for HIPAA compliant when it comes to faxing, which is a whole other story. We can rant about faxing all day, but anyway, yeah.
Do you know of one that is HIPAA compliant?
Yeah, efax.com. You pay them a little bit extra, and it's HIPAA compliant. They can even do faxing to email HIPAA compliant. So,
And I'm assuming PCI then as well.
yeah, efax.com. So, yeah.
We've been focusing on remote workforce for about the past year, since we have, and as a technology company, we have all of the resources that we need, but we've been focused on how to monitor, how to manage, how to build teams in virtual environments. And this just basically quickened our pace to get that done. So I did want to offer a couple of the resources that we've read or listened to. They're pretty quick reads. I didn't put any that would take months or weeks to read. The Influencing Virtual Teams is an hour listen on Audible, and the Long Distance Leader is 4 hours on Audible. And the Zapier is the ultimate guide to remote work. If you just Google that, there's actually pages that they have it broken out, and you can download their PDFs by what you're currently facing. A lot of this has to deal with managing remote workforce, though, and figuring out how to support your team during this time. But it's a pretty good resource.
For sure. All right. Our next one will be next Thursday at 4 o'clock. And from our poll, we're gonna talk about proprietary data loss, productivity monitoring, and culture. I got a couple of cool tools and some ideas on that. We'll do it next Thursday, and I appreciate it. I'm super excited that some people came and listened. I'm hoping some of this information helped you guys, or at least gave you some more questions to ask, because I definitely feel like that's what we're all doing here. So we all got more questions than we know. So.
Yep, I just want to offer ourselves as resources. We know that we got to stick together in these times to try to make sure that our companies, make it out of the end of this. And so, if you guys have questions or concerns, feel free to, call our office. They'll get you to us so that we can get to you and answer any questions that you can have right now.
Yeah, I mean, you watch my panel now, so you consider yourself VIP. Give me a call. We'll talk. Cool. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Be safe.